Back home now, and Sydney and Melbourne property markets appear to be more COVID-19 proof than other areas across the country. To tell us why, we're joined by Nerida Conisbee, Chief Economist at REA Group. Morning, Nerida, and happy Easter to you. Premium suburbs of Melbourne and Sydney faring okay?
Yeah, look, they are faring okay. We are seeing pretty different conditions when we have a look at both Melbourne and Sydney. If we go to areas where there are a lot of investment-grade stock, high levels of apartments, they're the areas that do seem to be struggling at the moment on the back of the rental crisis. If we have a look at some of Melbourne and Sydney's most expensive suburbs, they do seem to be holding up a lot better. We are still seeing very, very high levels of search. So if you have a look at somewhere like Sydney's east at the moment, we're seeing 6 times the level of activity that we're seeing in the southwest of Sydney. So for now, they're the ones that do seem to be holding up a lot better in terms of buyer demand.
Online auctions make up a third of previous auction markets?
Yeah, look, the auction market has changed significantly. Before COVID-19, we saw roughly around 15% of Australian homes sold via auction. We have had a ban on live auctions, and we have a lot of agents have now moved to digital auctions. But it is fundamentally a different way of selling, so the take-up hasn't been as great as online as live auctions. So we're only seeing around 5% of homes now sold via online auctions, which is a big drop from the 15%.
Of course, we live in a federation, and we're seeing a lot of the states have their own rules in and around a number of areas, schools and properties not excluded. Victoria has been banned or has banned inspections of occupied properties, despite the Prime Minister allowing agents to book private inspections.
Yeah, look, it was a bit of a shock. Came in quite late Thursday night. Consumer Affairs Victoria put in a ban on any inspections for which there was people living in the property. So there wasn't a lot of clarity put around the change. It is quite different to what's being allowed on a national level. So although open for inspections have been banned and live auctions have been banned, all other states are still allowing single visitation to properties. It does make it really hard for the property industry. I mean, in trying to buy or sell a home sight unseen is very, very difficult, and for the rental market too. So given that there are a rising number of rental properties becoming vacant, it is quite problematic for a lot of people that are trying to lease their properties.
There's certainly some parts of the world and parts of the economy that have slipped through the cracks when it comes to trying to safeguard around what's happening, particularly economically. The whole landlord-tenancy thing is just an absolute mess. Yeah,
look, it is. I mean, when having a look around the world now, I spent a lot of Thursday just having a look at the worst affected markets as to what's been happening to property. If you go to places like New York and the UK now, there has been a complete ban on any transactions. In the UK, you can't actually move home at the moment. There's been a restriction put around moving home. So it does make it quite difficult for people to transact. I mean, it's interesting though, listings in the UK haven't dropped that much. They've only dropped 1%, but properties transacted have dropped 70%. If we go to the UK, if we go to New York, there's obviously very few transactions taking place with people unable to view properties. Data is still quite hard to come by, and so in New York, the only data points that we can see is on the ultra premium market, where the level of transactions taking place is looking very much like post-global financial crisis.
Yeah, exactly, and that is the international view. Finally, Nerida, just on the topic of landlords and people that are renting their properties, can you see a clear path forward here? Because right up to this point, we've had several state governments saying, oh, well, OK, we'll alleviate land tax for landlords and there's no evictions. But it doesn't seem to be very solidified at all.
No, look, it's a real problem. I mean, there's still no clarity. We saw some information come out around commercial tenancies last week, so that provided a little bit more guidance as to how people should handle this. We have had the land tax being dropped in New South Wales, but I mean, it doesn't make a huge difference to people's outgoings. You only pay land tax in New South Wales if your property's worth over a certain amount of money, and that amount of money that you're paying on land tax wouldn't take up the loss in rent. We have problems too on the rental side. I mean, a lot of people are finding it difficult to pay rent. We are seeing a lot of tenants needing rent relief. some not needing rent relief, but seeing now as an opportunity to renegotiate their leases. And then on the landlord side, very difficult now if you've got a tenant paying no rent, but then you yourself have a mortgage to pay. So, it's a big problem, and we do need greater clarification as to how people should be handling this situation, particularly with a 6-month ban on evictions.
All right, finally, a brighter note. Some of the forecasting is obviously not as grim as we heard earlier, and Australia's in some fairly severe rules at the moment. How does that affect the forecasting, that we're bending the curve, so to speak?
Yeah, look, I mean, if we do, I mean, it's early days. I mean, like everyone, I've been watching the daily cases very, very closely, and hoping for good news. So, the sooner this ends, obviously, the better it will be for Australia. I think it's why we are being told to be so careful over this Easter long weekend that, we've seen a situation in Singapore where they were able to get the level of infections under control, but then they had some outbreaks amongst migrant workers, and suddenly their daily cases really flew up very, very quickly. So, I think at this stage, it looks like it's under control. I hope it continues, but, for now, I think it does show that the level of isolation that we're being put under does seem to be working.
Yeah, the property market's going to be a very interesting space, day by day, inch by inch. And thank you so much, Nerida. Enjoy your Easter in isolation.
Yeah, I will. Thanks.